Welcome to today's video spotlight focusing on the transition to electric buses in North America and Latin America. In the next hour, we will be exploring prospects, projects and outlooks concerning the decarbonization of the public transport fleets in these two regions, which are, by the way, very different regions. Latin America has been standing out at the moment as a performance leader in bus electrification. Just mention the case study of Santiago de Chile and Bogota, just for as an example. On the other hand, North America is lagging a little bit behind in terms of registration, but the Biden administration is pushing a lot for the decarbonization of commercial vehicle fleets. Within today's video spotlight, we will be exploring the reasons behind the Latin American leadership and North American situation, and we will also address a critical topic, the topic of funding, on how business model can are helping an effective transition to zero-emission buses in these regions. We're going to do this thanks to a series of 9 relevant players coming from 3 areas: the area of operators and institutions, and the area of industry players such as Iveco Bus and Power Up. Finally, the players from the consulting and from the organization side, which will be giving a little bit of a framework, of a background of this topic. Let's begin with Thomas Maltese and Mike Hines. They are respectively from the Zebra Partnership, so Latin America focus, and the organization CALSTAT with focus on North America. They will be presenting a picture of these two markets, starting with Thomas Maltese. So first things first, what is the Zebra Partnership?
Zebra, which stands for Zero Emission Bus Rapid Deployment Accelerator, is a partnership co-led by C40 cities and the International Council on Clean Transportation, with the support of several other partners across the region, including GGGI, Clean Energy Works, Centro de Movilidad Sostenible, and the World Resources Institute. Since 2019, we have been supporting cities across Latin America to accelerate the transition towards zero-emission bus technology. And we continue to do so in collaboration with many other partnerships, such as the 2Me Bus Mission. We work very closely to a handful of cities: Santiago, Bogota, Medellin, Sao Paulo, and Mexico City. But more broadly, we concentrate our efforts on transforming the zero-emission bus market in the region to ensure that cities can meet their demands for zero-emission bus technology and quickly decarbonize their public transport fleets, reaping the benefits not only in terms of greenhouse gas reductions, but also dramatically improving air quality in places where air pollution is indeed a very strong issue.
Well, now Thomas Maltese is going to bring us along a real journey around Latin America.
Latin America is the most urbanized region in the world, where people rely the most on buses to move around their cities. And Latin America is also the region where, outside of China, cities are speeding ahead like no other in terms of volume of large procurements of zero-emission buses. If you only take a look at the eBus Radar, the platform that we manage from the Zebra Partnership, there are currently over 4,000 e-buses operating in Latin American cities, and we expect hundreds more to enter operation later this year. If we want to look at some examples, it's obvious to start looking at Santiago. Chile has a very ambitious target of fully decarbonizing its entire public transport fleet by 2040. Santiago has the same target by 2035 and recently launched a fully emission bus tender, which will lead to the procurement of 1,000 vehicles. And we expect similar efforts by the regions outside of the metropolitan area of Santiago. Similarly, Bogota, which currently holds the largest fleet of e-buses in the region, has passed a law that forbids future procurements of fossil fuel buses, and also just launched its first pilot with a hydrogen bus, and soon will be followed by Santiago. If we shift to Brazil, Sao Paulo, the largest fleet in the region and of the Southern Hemisphere, is speeding ahead to comply with the mayor's goal of deploying 2,600 electric buses by 2024 in order to comply with its interim target of the climate law, which mandates a full decarbonization of the fleet over 20 years. Last year, the city banned new diesel bus procurements and has recently secured a public loan of $500 million to support the financing of this fleet. Mexico City, the other mega city across north of the equator, is also leading the way with the largest fleet of articulated e-buses in the region already running in the city's BRT system. And then it's worth mentioning that many other leading cities like Curitiba, Monterrey, Montevideo are designing innovative zero-emission bus projects through the adoption of very creative business models to overcome the high upfront cost of e-buses.
And we are very happy to have here also Mike Hines presenting us the big picture on how the deployment of zero-emission buses is evolving in North America, specifically in the US.
So we saw a 66% increase in the number of zero-emission buses between 2021 to 2022. So it's a fantastic achievement, and really indicates to CalSTART and the industry at large that we're moving in the right direction again towards those zero-emission goals. Much of that momentum that we're seeing is thanks in large part to support on the federal government side. Through the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, we've seen an enormous push to support transit agencies, not only on the policy end, but on the funding end, which is really what they need to achieve these goals. So much of the funding that transit agencies are seeking comes through the low and no emissions grants and the bus and bus facilities grants that are administered by the Federal Transit Administration. That program, Low-No alone, 2,600 zero-emission buses have been funded, and the programs combined are $1.7 billion for FY 2023. So you can see that there's really a large push on the federal side to support agencies with the funding that they need. And that's important because, as you well know, the move to zero emissions is not inexpensive. We're talking about vehicles, infrastructure, training, operators, dispatch staff, leadership at transit agencies. All these players are very important in making sure that a transit agency is in a position to be successful as they move forward.
Both Thomas Maltese and Mike Hines have mentioned an instrumental topic, the topic of the higher investment required to purchase zero-emission buses. And innovative financing models are really having a big role in Latin America.
There is a very strong need for cities to continue exploring new business models, diversifying their financing mechanisms, and really being creative with the way they challenge the traditional model in which buses were owned and operated. This is a particularly important barrier in smaller cities, where public authorities and operators face even more challenges to access credit and structure zero-emission bus projects with the sufficient guarantees. It's also worth looking at Uruguay, that is redirecting fossil fuel subsidies towards covering the price gap between electric buses and diesel counterparts. And this leads us to what is probably the most important trend that we're seeing in the region, which is a revitalization of public transport systems in spite of the drop in demand throughout the pandemic.
Still on this topic, we asked the opinion also of Jan Sample from the consultancy company Steer. So focus on the financing of electric buses. With challenges, with opportunities come with this.
E-buses are a good long-term investment, but the biggest challenge versus traditional internal combustion vehicles continues to be the higher upfront cost. So that really creates a market that is ripe for clever providers of finance to come in and provide some structured solutions. And I think we're increasingly seeing new forms of financing enter the market as a result. And maybe I'd even hesitate to really call them new forms of financing. I think these are often tried and true methods. but they're seeing an increased uptake or attention in fleet buying decisions now. So a couple of examples of that we could go over would be the traditional lease versus buy decision. So agencies that might have historically bought vehicles outright are increasingly thinking about leasing as a way to balance the higher upfront costs with longer term operating cost savings. And while that can be a simple decision at face value, it can really be a critical option for both public sector and private businesses to unlock their transition. It's historically been a tool that organizations have used when they're seeking rapid growth in particular, and rapid transition can be another good use case for it. So lease versus buy is one. Other examples, just quickly, are pay as you save structures, where a third party, sometimes a utility, might finance the initial investment and then look to recoup that investment through the long-term savings in costs compared to historical operating costs. A third would be aggregated purchasing, where smaller operators might be looking to aggregate purchases with other users to kind of try and unlock bulk discounts. A fourth would be e-bus as a service, so where third-party operators might be coming with an integrated procurement, operation, charging management, and operating solution. And then the fifth one that's interesting is the carbon credit market, and this is really a nascent market, but is an area where it could potentially be a viable long-term funding mechanism that could help attract other forms of private capital as well. So it's an interesting mix of players in this space, from traditional capital providers to bus manufacturers, technology companies, energy utilities. So it's quite a dynamic space right now.
And we know there is a big player when it comes to financing, providing energy, and managing buses and depots in Latin America. This big player is NLX. We have here Valerio Vadakino, which will start recapping a little bit the history of the presence of NLX in the electric bus segment of Latin America.
Effort of NLX in the electrification of public transport started in almost 10 years ago in Latin America, where we developed an initial project in Santiago de Chile of 100 buses, more or less, with a local private operator, Medbus, that is one of the largest operating in the Santiago de Chile metropolitan area, and with the support of the Minister of Transportation of the whole country. We now have only in Chile almost 1,500 electric buses in the area, developed in different phases of the project. And in the following up, the success of this electrification project in Chile, we also had the chance to put our flags and developed such similar, interesting and large project in Colombia. Also in that case in different phases, and so we have now serving almost 900 electric buses that are strolling already across the streets of the Colombian capital. In all those projects, we also had the chance to work and upgrade, in some cases, in particular in Colombia, building up from scratch electric depot. So all these almost 2,000 buses between Chile and Colombia are served through 30 electro terminal that we have been working on in upgrading the electrical infrastructure and building up the electrical and charging infrastructure within it, or as I mentioned, building up from scratch 6 electro terminal in Bogota, where we also take care of finding the land, build up all the civil and electrical works, connecting this depot to the grids, and operating and maintaining all the assets within these specific sites. After that, we also had the opportunity to close a couple of deals in Mexico that we still consider within the South America area. We are now operating charging infrastructure and energy infrastructure asset for two main routes in Mexico City, Line 3 and Line 4, under the umbrella of Metrobus Transit Authority responsibility. And we recently been awarded another project in Monterrey, in the state of Nuevo León, in Mexico, where we are going to implement 21 electric buses with the relevant electro terminal and all the services around it, always through the famous now NLX e-bus as a service proposition. We are on top of that very close to a large deployment of e-bus in Sao Paulo in Brazil, where we are working together with the SP Trans, that is the local city transit authority, and the OT private operator that operates under concession in the city, in order to electrify in the next couple of years 3,000 electric buses, more than 3,000 electric buses. That is the goal and target that city and municipality have published, have publicly announced recently. We have also additional project under development in other parts of South America, Central and South America, with the main and the same goal to support government institutions and public transport operator in this energy transition. So positioning ourselves as a system integrator, sort of one-stop shop in order to facilitate this energy transition and accelerate this energy transition to the large megalopolis in Central and South America.
But NLX has put his eyes also on North America.
We are also putting our first flags and seeds in North America, in particular in the United States. Also, in that case, we can leverage on a strong presence of the group, in particular in the renewable generation piece of the value chain. We have also strong presence in electric mobility in general, so supporting the private electric drivers with charger and charging solution. And we are the main player, or one of the main players, in the flexibility services in the country. So trying to support the different distribution and transmission grids across the country in order to alleviate any kind of stress in the grids through flexibility services, and also in that case supporting energy intensive customer to get some additional revenues from the system. So with all these ingredients in our basket, we are focusing our commercial effort in two main segments, so transit buses and school bus electrification. The main, I would say in particular for school bus, we see and we are experiencing a lot of interest and need from the operator and the school district to get a full support with an end-to-end proposition that it's really really fits with the as a service proposition that we have developed across Latin America. While in the transit bus segment, we are mostly focusing on supporting the transit authority and bus operator in electrification of depots, with also integration of resiliency solution, such as solar plus storage or any kind of backup solution, and properly design of the energy infrastructure at the depot in order to avoid any kind of potential issue, in particular in a large city where the distribution grid is super congested already and might not be 100% fitting the need of an electrification, a large electrification project for public transport.
Valerio Vadachino has just touched a topic, the topic of school bus electrification. And the electric school bus market is indeed a very relevant market. A study predicted that over 560,000 school buses are currently projected to be built in the next 10 years, of which slightly less than 27,000 will be electric. So big number in absolute terms, and big numbers also of zero-emission vehicles on the launching pad, according to this study. However, opportunities cannot go without challenges, as Jan Sample, still from Steer Group, highlights.
In North America, and particularly the school bus market, is a fascinating one for us to consider. There's a massive national fleet of school buses. In the United States, there's about 17,000 individual school districts nationwide. And operations of those buses are split between self-operated fleets by school districts themselves, as well as a large parcel of market that is outsourced and contracted operations, with some relatively large third-party operating companies that maintain fairly large fleets. So there is huge opportunity in this space. I think the challenge with school buses is that they have relatively narrow service missions, which result in generally low mileage operations. So we've got to consider that they're generally only operating for a few hours a day, 5 days a week, 10 months a year, give or take, with some school breaks likely sprinkled in there as well. So the utilization is not very high. And the challenge becomes that it is more difficult for those buses to capture the value of energy efficiency that they have over internal combustion vehicles, which is needed to offset the higher upfront costs, right? So there's a real challenge there. There are a lot of smart people that are thinking about how to overcome that, and I think it's likely some combination of lowering the upfront costs, increasing vehicle utilization by thinking about secondary uses for those buses, and potentially tapping into the battery resources of those fleets when they're offline so that they can have additional utility. So we're excited about helping clients work through those solutions. I think eventually we do see that market as opening up more. And despite those potential headwinds, I think there's certainly widespread interest and orders for electric school buses, for that matter, all over the country. So the demand is already established in there.
The already mentioned Santiago de Chile and Mexico City are among the leaders in bus electrification in Latin America. And Santiago de Chile has, of course, been a real front runner in this regard. We are extremely happy to have the opportunity to hear about the projects, the challenges and the roadmap of the Chilean capital from the voice of Paula Tapia Salas, the Director of Metropolitan Public Transport of the Ministry of Transport and Telecommunication of Chile.
In Santiago, Chile,
we have a very important challenge ahead, which is to continue advancing in electromobility. In the year 2017, it means 6 years ago, we introduced the first electric buses in Latin America. Now, 6 years after that experience, we can proudly say that Santiago de Chile is the city with the highest number of electric buses outside of China. And we need to keep moving forward. Today, we have more than 6,000 buses in the system, and over 4,000 of them are already Euro 6 or electric. Therefore, the challenge today is to continue generating not only a larger fleet, but also the necessary tools to better plan our routes and to achieve better territorial equity through electromobility. Territorial equity is very important to us because there are areas that are more remote, far away, and they have seen that e-mobility is far from their day-to-day lives. Therefore, as a government and its administration, we seek to reach with capillarity so that many are the ones who benefit from the advantages of zero polluting emissions, zero noise, and also, very importantly, contribute to the decrease of CO2 against climate change. But electric buses, of course, cannot be a standalone. Transitioning the fleet to zero-emission technology usually happens within the framework of a wider strategy aimed at improving and providing a better public transport offer to citizens. It's the case of Santiago de Chile.
No queremos cambios en años más, sino que queremos cambios.
In Santiago, we don't want changes in the years to come. We don't want changes in the future. We want changes now, today. And for that, we are also introducing a new competitive bidding process, which is very important to us, so that we hope international and national players can also participate in these processes. Which processes do I mean? First, a public call for tender, aimed at attracting new operators and incorporating as many as 1,000 new electric buses next year or in the following years. This will be done in a gradual and phased manner. Secondly, we are issuing technological tenders, which are very important. We need a world-class fleet management system and a ticketing system that is also world-class. Therefore, we are very much focusing at the moment on these processes, and we invite all companies to participate, and very importantly, the academy, the universities, to look at our processes and contribute to the studies and data that may be of interest. Metrobus, the bus rapid transit system of Mexico City, where 1.8 million people travel each day, has also set a clear roadmap towards electrification of the bus fleet. Let's hear this from the voice of Freddy Velázquez.
La composición de la flota de Metrobús hoy en día compone a 900 autobuses.
Today, the fleet of Metrobus is composed of 900 buses, which operate on 7 lines and 1 emergency route. In this context, we have different types of vehicles. We have 12-meter buses and 15-meter buses. We have articulated and bi-articulated buses. Finally, we also have double-decker buses. Within this bus fleet, 60 articulated buses are today electric, and we are about to incorporate 55 electric buses of 50 meters in the next 2 months. These electromobility projects mark the beginning of the change for Metrobus. The goal for the following years will be to replace all the vehicles in the fleet with electric ones, at an approximate pace of 100 vehicles each year. This is the vision we have, the goal we have, and we hope to have 100% of the system transformed into electric vehicles within the next 10 years.
Transformado en vehículos eléctricos.
But what about the financial, the economical impact of the transition to zero-emission buses? Let's start with Santiago. When we started operating electric buses, the vote given by the citizens on a scale from 1 to 7 was 6.3, while the rest of the system had a rating below 5. Therefore, the social impact is very important, and it is also important to measure it when evaluating the economic impact. Now, exclusively from an economic point of view, without doubt, 6 years ago, electric buses turned out to be more expensive. Nowadays, every day their prices have decreased more. Along with them, significant elements occur in the operation. Consumption costs between a diesel bus and an electric bus have decreased by about 1/3. From the perspective of maintenance, those numbers are even more favorable. Some speak of a ratio of 1 to 4 or 1 to 5. Therefore, the decrease of costs in operation, on average, has clearly exceeded 10% over these years, and we expect that over time it will continue to improve so that the transition from diesel to electric buses is even more positive in terms of social and also economical impact. And then continuing with Metrobus, Mexico City.
Los dos proyectos que hasta el día de hoy hemos puesto en marcha para el tema de los
The two e-mobility projects that we have launched until today have fulfilled the goal of maintaining the same cost per kilometer of diesel buses. Well, without any doubt, the first steps have been the slowest.
Sin duda, los primeros pasos son los más lentos. Nos llevó tiempo el poder desarrollar estos dos proyectos.
It took us time to develop these projects, and today we are moving forward currently to continue in this roadmap of e-mobility. However, along this path, different challenges begin to arise. One of the first is to awaken interest among financiers and the banking sector in order to carry out these projects. It is increasingly difficult to obtain long-term credits that allow us to achieve this first milestone, that is, to have diesel and electric buses at the same cost level. It is also necessary to convince the banking sector and new investors, as well as to reach agreements with credits that arouse appetite and balance the model. It has been very difficult to solve these issues. We have knocked on many doors and sought different investors, and little by little we have made significant progresses in obtaining new actors for the system. The first two projects involved credits, with the first one driven by Santander and the second divided into two parts, with the first part granted by HSBC. Currently, we are working to obtain the rest of the credit with different banks, including some national and international ones. We continue to promote and approach development banks, both international and local, in order to achieve incentives that allow us to advance towards our goal.
Para poder tener incentivos que nos permitan avanzar en esta meta.
Let's now move on the other side of the fence, let's say. We asked Gauthier Ricor from Iveco Bus, he's the public tenders and product management representative, which are the group's plan in Latin America.
Iveco Bus is present in Latin America since a long time with manufacturing footprint in Brazil and Argentina, and a long partnership in Latin America importers countries. So we are already present with our energy mix as of today, gas and diesel vehicle. And we will continue to pursue in this offering with the electromobility for sure. And our first main step will be the introduction of the daily electric in Latin America for local operators based on the van and the chassis-derived version. And this is actually the most concrete step in the coming months. Then, of course, we have the opportunities, and we already shown the vehicle to Fenatrans last year. It was the E-Way, the 12-meter bus offering manufactured in Europe. And this is a high-end quality product that could fit to some missions and some operators in Latin America. There were some demonstrations in Brazil, in Uruguay, and some other countries. We are planning to demonstrate this vehicle, and this is for sure a second offering which is possible in these countries. And for sure, the key point for Latin America is to get the perfect matching between the challenges of the countries, the regulations, and the operators to be matched with the product. And this would go through a kind of localization of the product derivated from technologic bricks or technologic know-how that we have already consolidated in our lineup in order to develop the perfect fit to the mission regarding the local challenges. So this would be the next step for us to get some local adaptation of our offering fitting to the market.
Interesting plans ahead then. Let's get to know which are the challenges and the opportunities that Iveco Bus see in that specific region, and how your group intend to pursue these goals?
We see a big potential of markets move towards electromobility because there is a real need there. So definitely it's on our radar, it's on our targets to be there and to propose and to offer the product and the services with probably a more extended approach than just the product, but including as well the full offering of the chargers, the infrastructure, including probably a complete turnkey solution approach with some infrastructure work, also including financing, because we know it's also a big challenge in the area. So when we are talking about the opportunities, there are a lot. We know as well that the challenges are huge. Challenges on the grid, readiness of the grid, readiness of the infrastructure as of today to welcome electromobility challenge, readiness of the network in order to be able to sustain operations for 10 to 15 years in a correct TCO, correct total cost of ownership for the operators and for the financer. So it's definitely the way we are approaching the region is to create and to go for the opportunities, but also addressing the challenges, offering a full turnkey approach and a full set of solutions for the operators.
New technologies, new challenges. Electric buses feature a crucial, very expensive and also quite neglected core component. We're talking about batteries, of course. How to get the best out of them, how to minimize the risks. Philippe de la Rochelle from the battery analytics company PowerUp shows up why leveraging on battery data and how that can have an impact on e-bus operation.
We're in this situation where the market is there, the time is now, but there is one critical challenge that remains to be solved, which is, how to optimize the use of those electric bus assets, which are, pretty complex after all. Those batteries, lithium-ion batteries, are complex systems, and that's where we believe strongly that battery analytics will play a very important role, right? And coming back to your question, what is key here is to leverage battery data for three reasons, really. One is to optimize vehicle performance. Everyone wants to make sure their bus assets work well for the benefit of their end customers. Reducing maintenance costs is also the name of the game. You want profitability out of your assets, and you want those assets to be working on the streets for as long as possible, extending their battery lives, right? So those are the three reasons why you want to use your battery data to the best possible extent. But for that, you need to know what data you need, right? And you need to carefully plan in advance and anticipate that this data collection process will be in place for you as a fleet operator, or as to be in a position to work with third parties in order to analyze this data. And that's where we come into that process with the data specification requirements. We discuss a lot about those requirements with our customers and prospects. And we have a list of things that are must-have, on our opinion. Not overly complicated, but sometimes some of those data are missing in the collection chain of our prospects and customers. And so we are trying to influence that process. So it's really about voltage, current, temperature, time series, raw data, which are measured, collected by the buses, And then, sometimes more difficult to get minimum, maximum cell voltage and cell temperature. All of this will allow fine detection of all kinds of performance and safety alerts or anomalies. And so it's really important to discuss with battery analytics companies like ours to make sure that the data retrieved is sufficient to get this analysis done. Why? Because this has direct impact on battery performance and anomalies detection. So as to take an example, we were able to detect on a fleet of e-buses that we could recommend actions to gain 5 to 10% performance and capacity in the batteries on each of the buses just by fine-tuning, modifying some of the parameters, rebalancing some aspects. And 5 to 10% overall is a big number. And so being able to make those recommendations, identifying performance issues and trying to solve them is key. And that's why we really believe that identifying early on the data requirements, making sure they are available, making sure they're usable by a third party is truly important in that process.
Well, so how to deal with batteries in the best possible way?
With regards to lithium-ion batteries, the issue is that those batteries will degrade over time. And that's their characterization, right? So you want to understand how this degradation is actually going to evolve over the lifetime of your asset life. And for that, you need to, you want to maximize the battery capacity. You want to track what we call the state of health. We can measure, diagnose the state of health, which is really the remaining capacity of each of the batteries of the buses. You want to measure the state of charge, which is really the available power in your batteries while you're driving your bus. So you want to make sure your bus can go to final destination. And to take an example, measuring those two KPIs accurately is really important. We've been able to simulate that, again, if we would actually modify and change some modules within the packs of a bus, an electric bus, it was possible to actually prolong the life of the battery by more than a year. Imagine how that translates into additional revenues and additional profitability for the same initial investment, right? Also, I'm thinking about tracking dispersion of results in a big fleet, right? You want to solve the issues of the worst performance. You want to understand why some other buses are performing better than average. You want to correct the common usage mistakes on maybe some of the drivers having a way to drive the buses that impacts the battery. So all of this can actually lead to maximizing the battery capacity. You also want to monetize your assets in the first life and in the second life, right? And eventually the battery degradation monitoring and the aging indicators are giving you an understanding of your asset depreciation. I mean, the battery counts for about 50-60% of the total cost of your bus. So it's a very big chunk, right? And so the battery degradation is actually correlated to your asset depreciation. And so you want to know the value of your asset in time, how it degrades. And you want to know very well when you get out of warranty and when you're reaching the end of your first life with this asset. And maybe you want to sell these batteries of your buses when they reach end of warranty. That's called, when those will go from first life to second life. And to sell those batteries for other applications like storage, stationary storage applications, as we can see it on the market already. You want to make sure that those batteries have a stamp, a passport that can help monetize and sell those batteries to another company that would be using them for another use case. So monetizing those batteries is also a second important rule. And for that to be optimized, you want to continuously assess their status with the battery analytics solution, so that at the end of the life, you know exactly their status and you can prove that they are still ready to be used in a different application. Finally, optimizing TCO also means having an important maintenance organization in place capable of preventive actions to avoid safety issues, right? That's probably the worst event in terms of brand impact, TCO degradation, as safety in public transport is paramount. You don't want to see one of your buses taking fire. This is the worst nightmare of any fleet operator. So that would affect obviously the TCO, and avoiding those issues preventively, having alerts indicating you that you have a safety alarm. You need to take action far before that would translate into a fire, giving you time to take action, giving you time to change the faulty module is absolutely key in that process for optimizing the profitability of your asset.
During this video spotlight, we've been hearing some very, very relevant figures, some important figures about markets where we're talking about Latin America specifically. The e-bus fleets are becoming very, very large during time. So, which are the precautions that should be adopted in these cases?
There's no implication other than just if the fleets become very large, then the probability to detect a safety situation becomes larger as well, right? It's mathematical. So even though the probability is very low, the larger the fleets, the higher the probability that something will happen. And so you really want to take preventive action here. You want to have a safety layer in place, monitoring the buses and making sure you can identify those very early signs that something may happen later in time. So what are those typical indicators that you need to monitor? We see mainly two of them as critically important. One is cell imbalance. The cell imbalance degradation is actually linked to the dispersion of cells or string of cells that are associated in series in those buses. And there are different root causes that explain cell imbalance. I don't want to go into too much technical details, but I think resistance dispersion, capacity dispersion, or state of charge dispersion are the three main root causes explaining that your pack is imbalanced in a bus. And that's really important to track and detect, because the local battery management system in a bus is incapable actually of taking care of those topics and issues, right? So you actually need something on top to identify those issues and supplement the BMS and alert the fleet operator that something is happening. And not only this can lead to safety issues, but also it will reduce the performance of your battery more and more in time, until the risk of thermal runaway would become really high. So predicting those issues, identifying early signs of cell imbalance is really important, and that's what we do with our system. A second indicator, which is very important, especially in the mobility segment, with e-buses in particular, is lithium plating detection. Lithium plating is also creates dendrites, and will eventually we will see short circuits and then thermal runaway situations happening. It's either linked to those cell imbalance issues that we just talked about, or it is also the consequence of fast and or cold charging situations. When you see those buses, you of course you want to charge them fast. You want to have an efficient service for your end customer. So we see more and more of those fast chargers. And of course, you need to operate your buses even in the winter when it's cold. And sometimes you would need to charge them while it's cold. So fast and cold charging situations are happening more often in the mobility segment for that reason. And those fast and cold chargers have, implications in creation of lithium plating. And that, of course, may lead to, there again, thermal runaway situations and fires. So you really want to implement a good charging strategy to avoid those usage situations. And you also want to have a safety layer here and an accurate analytics solution, tracking your battery usage conditions, in particular current voltage, temperature at all times, to prevent those situations, those safety situations from happening. Again, you don't want to have one of your buses taking fire. This is the nightmare of any fleet operator. And today, the only way to prevent that and to, again, have time to act is to track the data, is to monitor the data, and is to make sure that if an alarm comes up, then you would intervene fast enough to make sure that your fleet is harmless for your end customers.
There is just one technology we haven't already touched today. It was just mentioned by Thomas Maltese with regards to a very first pilot in Bogota. It's fuel cell technology. That has SARTA, as an agency from Ohio, USA, as one of the main adopters nationwide, as the CEO Kirt Conrad is going to explain.
Stark Area Regional Transit Authority, we're located in Canton, Ohio, which is south of Cleveland. We've got about 120 buses altogether. The balance of our fleet, we have about 60 compressed natural gas buses. We have 21 fuel cell buses, and the balance is about 15 or so diesel vehicles. We're in the process of eliminating all those diesel vehicles. We should be out of those probably by the end of next year. And then we're slowly converting or transitioning the rest of the fleet to hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. We have found that about 95% of all the routes or blocks that a bus operates in North America is about 300 miles. So that fuel cell bus really does provide a real one-to-one replacement for a diesel or CNG bus. We found that the battery electric bus is around about 150 miles, whereas the fuel cell is about double that. So really for us, the fuel cell gives us a much more comparable performance as a more traditional internal combustion engine.
But what about costs of this technology and the readiness of the industry?
The one thing that we see with the fuel cell side is, the first buses that were produced under the Federal Transit Administration's programs are like $5 million. The second ones come down to like $2.5 million. And we've seen that price half again, where we're paying about $1.1 million for a fuel cell bus. The issue really starting, we think we can get those prices down closer to $700,000 per vehicle. It's really manufacturing and getting the volumes to the point where you can buy more of those. So we're seeing the glide path, so to speak, for those buses coming down even more as the components get you're buying more and more of those, the fuel cell gets better. So we think that just through the increased market deployment, you should see those prices coming down.
Let's get back to Latin America. We outlined a picture so far of a high, growing, exciting demand for zero-emission buses. But why is Latin America so advanced in zero-emission bus deployment?
Latin America is in a huge need of infrastructure because many countries have experienced recently a pretty large growth in terms of economies, in terms of number of people that living in the city. So it's sort of industrialization phase of many of the countries over there. And so somehow they started from scratch, so they needed infrastructure and they wanted to deploy infrastructure in a more sustainable way. On the other side, there was, and there's still, a super strong commitment from the public institution at the central level. I take the example of Chile in particular, because it's also, in my view, a pretty good example of giving continuity to a specific target, timeline, and direction that has been taken some years ago, even though there have been also some changes in the political, I would say, scenario in the recent past. So the commitment of public institution and government has not been limited to public announcement. We want to electrify all the fleet by 2040. That for sure is a strong message. But on the other side, there's been also some tangible support from the institution, in particular because the same government in Chile in particular, but there's been also copy and pasted in other countries across Latin America, is positioning itself as a grantor of the operation and the project in large electrification process that we have been working on. So in this case, obviously, the support, the proactive support of the government allows this project to mitigate very strongly any kind of potential risks, in particular financial risks, that large deployment such the ones that we are experiencing and seeing in Latin America brings with themselves. So this is an example that we are not seeing so easily replicated in other parts of the world, but those are really elements and support and steps that made this transition so fast and so successful in that part of the world.
Such goals and such a politically driven roadmap implies that there is an industry able to keep up the pace with the goal in e-bus deployment. Then we asked Thomas Maltese, how is the industry reacting to meet such a demand expected in Latin America?
Local manufacturers are ramping up their offerings of e-buses. Volvo just launched their e-bus locally produced in Mexico and will soon deploy it in Colombia and Brazil. And it will be followed by similar efforts by Scania. Eletra in Brazil is developing a wide range of models for the country to accommodate all vehicle segments needs by cities. However, new players are also entering the market. Higer already sold its first batch of electric buses in Brazil and announced it will soon open a factory to produce these vehicles locally near Fortaleza. Yutong, Zhongtong, Foton, and BYD are also ramping up their offerings across the board. And this leads to many new vehicle segments entering the market. We're expecting 15-meter buses to arrive soon in Mexico. We will soon likely see the first fleet of electric B-articulated buses. However, it's worth mentioning that there is still a very strong gap in the market, given the lack of smaller vehicles. We're talking about vehicles smaller than 8 meters. So there's definitely a lot of work that still needs to be done in order not only to diversify the availability of zero-emission bus models, but also to create local jobs and ensure that these vehicles are produced locally. It is with this intent that from the Zebra partnership, we recently launched the investment guide for the Brazilian e-bus market to attract more companies that would like to produce buses in the country.
Let's approach the conclusion of this video spotlight. The future of zero-emission bus market looks quite bright in Latin America. Let's get some figures.
Currently in Latin America, there are over 4,000 electric buses circulating in public transport fleets. We expect hundreds more to enter operation over the coming months, but this number is expected to double over the next couple of years through the procurement of 1,000 electric buses in Santiago through the recently published tender, 2,600 electric buses expected to be deployed in São Paulo, existing tenders in cities like Goiânia and São José dos Campos in Brazil, Monterrey in Mexico, and many other cities in Central America and South America will lead to really astonishing numbers that were unthinkable only a few years ago. And if we take a further look at Brazil, if we reference our recently published investment guide for the country's e-bus market, we can see that a selection of the 8 most advanced cities in terms of zero-emission bus procurement will lead to the projected deployment of over 11,000 e-buses by 2030. And this is not taking into account the rest of the country.
A lot of efforts, however, are still to be done, and collaboration in North America, and not only, is key.
We know we have a lot more work to do. Again, that 66% increase is a great number, but it's only about 5,600 vehicles if you look at the landscape. So we know there's a lot more work to do to achieve zero emission goals. The funding that we have supports those transition plans, but we know it's going to take a collaborative effort, if you will, between the federal government, state and local governments, and the utilities. And that's kind of one of the unique things I think about transit is that transit isn't an island. It's very much in the fabric of the communities that they serve. There's a great opportunity for these agencies to work with public and private partnerships, to work with the communities that they serve, and to work with the funding that's provided to them to give them opportunities to achieve their zero emission goals. We are seeing transit agencies move away from pilot projects where they may be, 2, 3, 4, what have you vehicles into much larger deployments. That's great. Obviously, we're seeing that in larger agencies like New York MTA, LA DOT, for example. But we're seeing smaller agencies look at what funding is available to them, what support do they have, and how can they kind of move the needle in their own right for their zero emission goals. I think one of the most important things that we have to remember is that each agency is going to look through the transition to zero emissions through their own lens. One of the best ways that they're doing that is through a fleet transition plan. Now, obviously, that's required under federal funding requirements for programs like Low-No and bus facilities. But really what it provides is a roadmap for an agency. It's going to look at all the parameters that are going to make them successful, policy, infrastructure, workforce development, how they're training their staff, what their fleet characteristics are, what their service area is. So they can really kind of take a holistic look at their service area, what their goals are, what they want to achieve, and kind of develop that roadmap that's going to help them move towards their goals. And ultimately, it's going to help them find the options that work best for them. Each agency is different. There's a phrase that we often hear: if you've seen one transit agency, you've seen one transit agency. In many ways, that's true because they may have different geographical restrictions, different weather types, northern climate, southern climate, what have you, a mixture of both, different ridership levels, different fleet characteristics. So really, they have to look at it from their own lens of what works best for them. And so what I think that provides is an opportunity for CalSTART, for OEMs, for industry, for infrastructure to really come together and work with these transit agencies, look at what's unique, look at what has worked for other agencies, look at what's going to work for this particular agency, and again, provide a roadmap to a successful implementation of zero emission.
Well, I personally enjoyed a lot Mike Hines stressing the point that transit is not an island, it's something which is related to the fabric of the communities. And we thought it was a good idea to conclude this video spotlight with Jan Sample. I will let him some conclusive consideration concerning the differences and the opportunities between the two markets of Latin America and North America.
Steer works extensively in both North America and throughout Latin America. And what's really fascinating is that there are different signs of progress in both markets, but both are seeing progress achieved in different ways and for different reasons. So I think in Latin America, we're seeing a greater role for private enterprise coming in and offering financing, which can help deliver on the goals and mandates that have come down. I think in North America, those financing solutions tend to be less critical, which obviously isn't to say that the money doesn't matter, because money always matters. But most public agencies, whether they're transit agencies or school districts thinking about renewing their fleets, or even some more private enterprises like hospitals or universities, they have significant access to public funding opportunities through grants, which private financing is obviously not going to be able to compete with. So, for example, the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act, provides an upfront subsidy of $40,000 for an electric bus, in addition to the incentives and investment programs around building out charging networks and supporting the manufacturing supply chain for zero emission vehicles. So, that's meant that there's more opportunity for direct procurement and operation by a wide variety of operators in North America. The challenge that we're seeing there is that there's less specialization and less expertise in those agencies. And I think sometimes that the progress, the process, is more unique and sometimes slower overall as a result. In both Latin America and North America, though, I think it's fair to say that agencies are generally behind in their electric fleet targets. And we view the main reasons for that as being primarily institutional and regulatory rather than technical or energy supply capacity issues or things of that nature. In Latin America, even cities that have seen really significant levels of progress, like Santiago in Chile or Bogota in Colombia, both of which are markets where STEER has worked extensively, and where there are electric bus fleets of 1,300 to 1,700 vehicles, respectively, in those cities. That's still representing only like 25% of the total fleet. So, while the adoption of e-buses in Latin America is probably ahead of North America, mainly because of the more kind of commercial nature of the operators there, we still see that there is significant progress and even momentum in North America. You asked about what the key to that progress might be, and I think at this stage, probably the most critical force is public pressure, and the expectations for transitioning to alternative fuels has really accelerated. And I think among both the general public as well as senior elected officials in a lot of the country, there's really an expectation that emissions reduction is a core part of long-term transportation planning at this point.